billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Welcome to our weekly series, The Struggle Within. A show, as we've mentioned, at the head of every single show is inspired by the hadith related from the 6th Holy Imam when the Prophet and the companions were returning back from battle. They were congratulating one another on having performed the Jihad. After which the Prophet said to them, prepare yourselves for the greater Jihad. So they asked one another, or they asked the Prophet, what is this greater Jihad? And he said, this is the Jihad of the nafs, the greater Jihad. And this is what we have coined this phrase, or the title of this show, The Struggle Within, looking at various different topics as surrounding around this greater Jihad. I'm delighted to be joined by Sheikh Bahman Poor this week. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you very much for taking the time. Having discussed various different issues and topics and pitfalls so far, today we want to look at ujb. Again, we're going to look at another hadith beginning from, this is narrated from Imam Ali alayhi salam, where when he was asked about ujb, he says there are several levels of ujb, and one of them is when one's bad qualities appear to him as good. He reckons them as good ones and congratulates himself, imagining that he has performed a virtuous deed. Another level of ujb is represented by a person who believes in God and thinks that he has done a favor upon God, whereas God Almighty has conferred a favor upon him. Sheikh, if we can begin with a description of ujb.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. My salams to you and to the viewers, and thank you for inviting me to take part in this ethical discussion, actually, because these issues are somehow in the area of ethics and morality, which is one of the areas that we really have to look after in our own development, in our own self-development. Now, ujb is literally, it means to wonder about something, wonder in the sense that to become amazed of something. And one would have ujb when they are amazed about their own qualities. In a sense, they are fascinated, self-fascination about one's own faculties. That's why we translate ujb to be self-admiration or self-congratulation usually. Now, as you mentioned in the hadith, there are levels of this which actually deteriorate one after another. Now, this deterioration, as Imam alayhi salam mentions it, from the lowest sort of level of ujb, or the meanest level of ujb, so to speak, is when you have bad qualities and then you are somehow fascinated by them. You congratulate yourself because of that bad qualities, because of bad beliefs, because of being in error. But you think that all these qualities are very good, and you admire yourself for that. In Surah Kahf, towards the end of Surah Kahf, we have one verse which alludes to this very evil trait in human being, which is quite destructive. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قل هل ننبئكم بالأخسرين أعمالا. Do you want me to inform you about those who are the most they are losers in the most possible way? أخسرين أعمالا means they have lost whatever they have done in this world. They are in error, and this error has caused them great loss. الأخسرين أعمال الذين ظل سعيهم في الحياة الدنيا وهم يحسبون أنهم يحسنون صنعا. Those whose efforts in this world goes out of the way, it goes awry, and then they think that they are doing something good. Now, as long as we do error, but we realize that we are committing error, as long as we realize that we are on the wrong side, there is hope for retrieval. There is hope that, okay, one day I'll try my best to correct my way, to correct my style of life. There is a hope. But if I am in that error, and actually I'm quite fascinated by it. I like it very much. We see this in our daily life every day. I mean, we see people who do all sorts of evil, and they think that these are values. They think that these are merits. And there is no chance for these people. This is quite destructive for human soul. Now, the other level of ujb is that you are not in error, so to speak. You are not far away from the right path. However, the things that you do, you always admire yourself for them. Now, what's wrong with this? The other one, the meanest level of ujb, as we discussed, okay, we understand what is the destructive side of it, because you always would remain in error. Now, what if we are not in error? For example, we worship. We do all sorts of good things, but we are very fascinated by what we do, attributing all that to the origin of all, the origin of all that we think comes from us. There is no one else there. It is me. It is I who's doing this. Now, the problem with this is that, first of all, it stops your progress. If we have such an ujb. For example, we are quite fascinated by 5 daily prayers that we do, or fast in Ramadan that we do. First of all, it would stop our progress, because we think that that is quite enough for us to do, while it's not. No matter how long we live, no matter how much we do, we always have room for further progress. So this ujb, this self-admiration of doing things in this way, and then thinking that this originates from our own selves, would stop our progress. And secondly, it limits our attention, it limits the scope of our existence, because we focus on ourselves. If we limit our scope of focus to ourselves, we cannot see things outside ourselves. We cannot see cannot see that things come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are just a drop from an ocean. If we always focus on this drop, and always think that this drop is the best thing in the world, is the, so to speak, the greatest thing that might possibly be in this world, then we are deprived of seeing the ocean. So this stops us our progress, and focusing on ourselves creates evil, because the self has lots of desires. When we have this sort of self-admiration, then we think that other things that we do as well may be good. We always think that values emanate from us, merits emanate from us, and this is of course very destructive. The point is, also, it would bar us from thanking God, because we think that these things come from us, not from Him. And this is what the Quran always gives us direction, that look where have you come from, what has been your origin. And if we look at our origin, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ مِمَّا خُلِقَ, man should focus, should consider what is the origin of his creation. خُلِقَ مِن مَاءٍ دَافِقٍ, just drop of water. Now we have developed into this, and we think that all these things we have brought with ourselves, or we have created ourselves. There's a very nice story in this regard. I don't know if we have time to mention it. Yeah. There are in hadith books, there is in hadith book one very beautiful story about Najashi, the king of Abyssinia. You know that when Muslims migrated to Abyssinia in the first place, with Ja'far ibn Abi Talib being the leader of one of these early groups going to Abyssinia. Now, when they recited the Quran for the king and the people in the court, we have in the Quran that some of them started to have tears in their eyes. مِمَّا عَرَفُوا مِنَ الْحَقِّ, they realized that this is haq, this is right. And usually when we realize something haq, tears come to our eyes. This is natural. Now, تَرَى أَعْيُنَهُمْ تَفِيضُ مِنَ الدَّمِ مِمَّا عَرَفُوا مِنَ الْحَقِّ, you see their eyes is full of tears of what they realized of Haqq. Now, one of these people, there were several priests there, and of course the king, other courtsmen. One of these people who were affected so much and influenced by this recitation of the Quran by Ja'far and others was the king himself. And he converted. But of course he could not convince his people. That's why he had to conceal his faith. It's very interesting. Usually people conceal their faith from kings. Here the king had to conceal his faith from his people. And that's why when the Prophet, peace be on him, heard the demise of Najashi in Abyssinia, he did Salatul Janazah for him in Medina, because of course there was no access to go there. Now, Ja'far says that one day King summoned us, and we were ushered to where the king was, but this was not the ordinary way we usually went. Usually we were led to the main hall of the court and such things, of the palace. But this time we were led to a very small room, and when the door was opened, we saw Najashi was sitting on the ground on dust, and he was not wearing the usual dressing that he usually had, the majestic sort of clothes of the king. He was wearing a very sort of modest clothes, an old one, and sitting there, eyes probably full of tears. So first of all, we thought something has happened. Some calamity has come, he has lost someone or something. And he, as soon as he saw us, he said, come, I want to give you a very good news. And we just were perplexed. What is it? The good news and this situation. So we were all ears. He said that, my eyes, my detectives or spies in Arabia have informed me that your prophet, our prophet actually, because he was a believer as well, had a great victory in Badr. And he was explaining in a way that, of course, they understood. There was a place called Badr, and the Meccans went there, your prophet went there, and the two armies met. And despite the small number of the armies of the prophet and all those things which happened, because the spies had informed him completely what had happened, who was killed, who was spared, everything he knew. So he said that God has given us great blessing with this victory, and now faith is growing. Ja'far says that I asked him, well, this is very good. Of course, we are very happy about it. But why are you sitting like that? Why are you wearing such a clothes? He said, because our prophet Jesus, which of course now he believes in Prophet Muhammad, but Jesus is our prophet as well. We believe in all the prophets of God. Our prophet Jesus has taught us, we have read in our books, that whenever Allah gives you a new blessing, a new ni'mah, renews a blessing for you, you renew your thank for him. You renew your humbleness, your humility towards him. And I am actually acting based on that. I am renewing my humility and my thank to God. Now, this is a very beautiful story, of course, but why should we do that all the time when we receive a new blessing? For example, God would give us a tawfiq, a blessing, to do Salatul Layl, for example. We couldn't do it before. Now, God gives us a new blessing to do Salatul Layl. Now, we have to renew our humbleness and humility so that we don't assume that this is from us. This is a blessing from our Lord. First of all, our life, our time, our energy, everything is from him. And secondly, this is a new blessing. Maybe God is rewarding us. Or maybe without us having done anything, he's just giving this blessing to us so that we renew thank for him. Now, if by that Salatul Layl I become sort of mu'jab, or I self-admire myself, what will happen? That blessing would go. I just destroy myself by creating arrogance instead of humility towards the Lord, and then the ni'mah would go out of my hand. So that is very important, that for the blessings that God has given us, for good qualities that we have, we do not assume that they independently belong to us. They are blessings of God. This is very important.
Hassan, thank you. I think you've touched on many elements that we wish to touch on, and we will return to all of these things. One thing that I wanted to look at is, trying to bring this into a very real kind of context. So we may be in a situation where we're trying and we're doing things, like we use this example of Salatul Layl, for example. If an individual was like this and they were making these kind of efforts and they were surrounded by other individuals who were careless about these things, maybe not initially, but gradually over time, do you not think there would be an element where such an individual would notice that they have these better traits within them and the other individuals don't, and then there is some level of ujb there? Would this be... can we imagine such a scenario?
Well, of course, there is always this danger. And most of us are plagued by this situation. And that's why we cannot progress. If God sees capacity in us for giving us great bounties, then He would have done it. The problem is we don't have the capacity. If God gives us more, we destroy ourselves, just like you say. For example, I do Salatul Layl, everyone beside me, they don't do it. Now then I think, I am a special person. I am quite distinguished from all these people. And this would be actually the poison which would kill me. And that's why in hadith you have, for example, sometimes that Allah would not bless someone to wake up. Someone who has the habit of Salatul Layl would not bless him a couple of nights, so that he's not plagued with this situation, to think that, it's me who is doing it. Now, what is the remedy for this? The remedy is that if we have more blessings. Now, usually we see material blessings. For example, I have more property, more wealth, and such things. If we give thanks, Allah would increase because we have the capacity for it. Okay. Now, compared to spiritual blessings, these blessings are nothing. They are just trivial. And usually people are caught with the spiritual blessings, you see, when they have that blessing of having great knowledge, for example, great spiritual attitude, then it turns into its own opposites. The humbleness which is required, or which should be produced by these acts of worship, would create arrogance. Now, the very plain example of that is Iblis. Iblis was worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way that no jinn ever worshipped, to the extent that he was raised to the level of angels. He was worshipping with angels, praying with angels. Now, when the command came to prostrate before Adam, now he thought that it was him who was doing all those things. قَالَ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُ, I am better than him. And a very silly argument. I don't know, this shaitan, despite all the intelligence that Allah has given him, is so silly as well. Why are you better than him? خَلَقْتَنِي مِنْ نَارٍ. He doesn't say, because I have worshipped such and such, I have done all these good things, I have humbled myself before you in every way. He just says, because you have created me from fire, created him from dust. Okay, who said fire is better than dust? I mean, a very silly argument that he brings about. And this shows ujb and arrogance makes us stupid. Really, it makes us stupid. Stupefies a person. And therefore, it is very dangerous. It is very dangerous that if we are walking on this path of wayfaring, we have to always be very, very careful. And this is what we see from prophets, from Isa alayhi salam, from Musa alayhi salam, from our Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, from Ayyam alayhi salam. They were always in caution, very much, that suddenly everything may be taken away if there is a slightest amount of self-admiration in them. Of course, that's a very, very high position. We cannot have that. And we cannot be purified from self-admiration the way they are purified. And because of that capacity, Allah gives them. You see, about the Prophet, peace be on him, وَعَلَّمَكَ مَا لَمْ تَكُنْ تَعْلَمْ إِنَّ فَضْلَهُ كَانَ عَلَيْكَ كَبِيرًا. He taught you whatever you didn't know. And his blessing, his grace on you is huge. Why? Because he had the capacity. If what was given to the Prophet, suppose was going to be given to us, the first drop of that knowledge given to us made us swell and grow in arrogance and such things, and that would have killed us. We have one other hadith which is very interesting. The hadith says that one mu'min, one man of taqwa, and one fasiq, one man of disobedience, they entered the mosque. The man of the fasiq, the man of disobedience, came out as a muttaqi, as a mu'min. The muttaqi came out as a fasiq. How? And this is a very interesting dilemma, the hadith says. Because the muttaqi entered the mosque, offered the most beautiful praise and blessings and worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he became mu'jib. Wow, look how Allah, look how I offer you worship, how I offer you thank. And he became with that ujb, he came out with that ujb. Now this is of course fisq. The fasiq went into the mosque regretting what he had done, thinking about his sins, humbled himself to Allah so that he would forgive him, and Allah forgave him, and he came out as a mu'min. So you see how dangerous these issues are. And sometimes we have to thank Allah that he doesn't give us certain things, because if he gives us certain things that we don't have the capacity to absorb, then we destroy ourselves with this.
It seems as though, it's more subtle than the way you explained it just now. Because I'm trying to think, the majority of people, when they go to pray, when they fast and they do these things, it doesn't enter their mind. But it seems it can be so subtle, and maybe when they are put in a certain scenario, or they have to spend time with a certain individual, or they see the behavior of a certain individual, they notice that, okay, I don't have these traits. Because I feel it's something that we may all have to a certain extent. It's something that is so common.
Yes.
And definitely something that we need to...
What the remedy for this is always remembering what is our origin. Who were we? Where have we come from? We were nothing. We did not bring anything to this world with us. We cannot actually create anything unless, of course, by the power of Allah, because we don't have power ourselves. We grow, we are given power, which is actually His power. We are using His power actually to do things. And anything given to us is just a blessing. And this is something that if we think about it, then of course it would bar us. Once Musa alayhi salam asked Allah, Ya Allah, how can I thank you the way you deserve? Because when I want to thank you, I thank you. Okay, I say, Ya Allah, I'm thankful for all your blessings. Then I think, who gave me this, who inspired me with this sense of gratitude? You. Who gave me the attention to look at what you have given me, and then I become sort of impressed by it, and then feel that I have to thank you. So then, for every thank that I offer you, I have to thank you, because it's a new blessing. Imam Zain al-Abidin says as well, it's a new blessing. Then I want to thank for that blessing, I have to thank for another blessing. If we look at ourselves as such, it's very difficult, of course, because we think that we are the origin, we are the source. While it's all blessings, we only open You see, the only thing that we have to is open our heart towards God, and He gives. And when He gives, then we shouldn't think that that belongs to us. It is His blessing. In this way, of course, we are immune from urge, which creates more evil things, like for example, arrogance. Now, there's one thing that Imam Reza alayhi salam has mentioned, is that a mu'min should have certain qualities. One of them, which is the most difficult, he actually counts 10 traits for a believer, and then he says, Al-Ashara, wa ma adraka mal ashara, the 10th one. And how can I describe for you what is the 10th one? This is the most difficult one, is that a believer is the one, a man of intellect. This hadith is about aql and intellect, is that whoever they come across, they say, they are better than me. He or she is better than me. And then everyone was amazed. We see many people around the world, they are doing all this mischief. For example, we are believers, we see disbelievers and whatever. Imam says, yes, that's true, but you have to argue with yourself that maybe there are good traits hidden in them that I don't see. But there are bad traits apparent, appear manifest. And maybe what appears from me, what is manifested in me as good traits, is just a veneer, it's just a superficial thing. And maybe I have bad qualities inside hidden that I have to fight against. You see, this is how we can fight against this evil of focusing on ourselves, which creates evil again and again and again.
One of the ways where this trait can become we see in action is when individuals interact with one another. A person who has ujb can become judgmental about others, and this judgmental kind of attitude where we label people. Maybe, for example, someone has behaved or made a mistake, but we label them that way, and we don't give them the opportunity that they could change, for example, or we think they are less than us. Maybe, for example, we see that they may have committed certain sins, we have not committed certain sins, but then we label them that, how could you do this? You should have known better. Or we just think, we judge them to be less, and then we don't make time for them. Mm-hmm. So this idea of judging others and becoming judgmental, and how this can break relationships even, and break trust between people, and even how that can sort of relate into relationships, marriages even, those kind of things.
Yes, this hadith that I mentioned from Imam Reza alayhi salam, to a certain extent explains this, that whoever you see, you judge them to be better than you, no matter what they do. Judge them to be better than you, and you judge yourself to have a lower position. However, this of course should not lead us to be a libertine and to think that, okay, people should do whatever they do and we should not judge them. And who are we to do amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar? You see, there are two different categories in judgment. One is judging people by their behavior based on the framework that we are taught, the instructions. Okay, if someone, for example, commits ghibah or backbiting, you have to say, you are wrong. This is judgment. You are wrong, you shouldn't do it. If someone doesn't pray, you are wrong, you have to pray. If someone commits all sorts of mischiefs, they are wrong. Of course, we are taught we have to stop them. Sometimes we have to fight them. For example, if someone is oppressing other people or killing other people, we have to fight them and stop them. And that is judgment, of course. Now, this judgment is something which is a social matter. However, this doesn't mean that God also is going to judge us in the same way. Maybe if, for example, I do certain mischief, it's because I have a bad background, for example. God would judge me as a sort of, as the expansion of my past and future contains me, you see. But I judge people based on what they do now. A judge, for example. I mean, a judge who convicts a murderer, for example, to life imprisonment or to qisas, for example. Well, he is not saying that this man is bad in the eyes of God. No. Socially, this man should have this punishment, okay? And this is something important amongst ourselves as well. When we see evil, when we see people not obeying God, we have to try to convince them or to encourage them. Or sometimes if, for example, the Muslims are attacked by others, we have to stop them. That's, of course, a social issue. But this doesn't mean that we have to judge the way God judges people. You see, maybe in the eyes of God, someone who appears to be very good and very obedient, God judges him in a very different way. And a sinful person, he may judge him in a different way. So we shouldn't play God. We shouldn't put ourselves in the position of God. However, in social relationship, we have to put ourselves in position of a judge, in position of someone who does amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. These two positions. This is actually very important when it comes to kufr as well. You know, we sometimes used to do takfir amongst ourselves, that who's kafir, who's mu'min, because this, for example, has these views, this is kufr, or such things. Actually, Allah talks about kufr among the believers. Yes. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ. Those who believed in the book, but they were kafir. Well, this is true about Muslims as well. There are many Muslims who are kafir as well. Kafir in the sense that they disobey God. Disobedience is a type of kufr. How Allah judges us. Not giving thanks to Him is a type of kufr, of course. Ingratitude is kufr. Now, however, in our social relations, anyone who says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we regard them as Muslim. We do not tell they are kafir, no matter how they believe, what is the tenets of their belief system, because they confess into these two things and believe in the Quran, they are Muslim. But this is not the way Allah is going to judge us there. No. A Muslim may be regarded as a kafir there, but not in this world. We have to distinguish what actually has confused certain people who have become takfiri in this world. They think that they have to judge people the way God judges them. The Khawarij, for example, at the beginning, anyone who disobeyed God or committed the slightest sin, they said is kafir. Well, yes, maybe kafir in the eyes of God and may be judged in that way, but in our social relations, God has told us that you have no right to do that. Anyone saying these two shahadatain, they are Muslim. I will judge who is kafir, who is mu'min on the day of judgment.
Ahsan, thank you for that. One of the things that we wanted to look at was this idea of when you embark on this path, or one of the things that we often feel is we feel the blessings. We're also grateful for these blessings, but then we label ourselves as special, maybe even subconsciously, because I think most of these things are subconscious as opposed to a conscious understanding or a conscious decision to say that, okay, I am a special or I am a favorite of God. But you will often find that people who have embarked on this, people who often they'll consider themselves as friends of God. You'll hear this term. They consider themselves close to God, and they can almost even do wasiyah for people, these kind of things. How dangerous is this, and how aware do we need to be of such things?
You know, the closer we go to God, the humbler we will become. So if we think that we are a friend of God and still we have this sort of attitude, it means that we are not yet a friend. A friend wouldn't behave in that way. However, this is a lifelong struggle, you know. We cannot leave this takabbur or ujb overnight. It's not possible. It's a lifelong struggle. The more we recite the Quran, recitation of the Quran is very, very important because it gives us the values that we have to internalize. Reciting it, understanding it, it internalizes in us certain values which are prerequisite for that sort of attitude. The stories that the Quran tells us, the way he describes God, the way he describes man, the origin of man, the end of man, these things give us the required values for such attitude. And then, of course, worship, humbling oneself before God. This is a lifelong struggle. There is a hadith from Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam that takabbur is the last thing which goes out of the heart of a believer. You see, it is always with us. We have to somehow reduce it, make it smaller and smaller and smaller. And there are certain things that never would go, even on the thresholds of paradise, is still with us. That needs the final touch of Allah. That's in Surah A'raf. It says when people come to the thresholds of paradise, there is something still in their hearts. I have to take it. This is a very, very interesting verse in Surah A'raf. It says that وَنَزَعْنَا مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مِنْ غَلٍّ. The ghal is impurity. And the most important part of that impurity is that we see things emanating from us. And this stops us from receiving blessings of God. وَنَزَعْنَا مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مِنْ غَلٍّ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهِمُ الْأَنْهَارِ. Now these rivers are coming from paradise, but they still haven't entered, because the following verses say that they still haven't entered. Now, after we take this ghal from their hearts, وَقَالُوا الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي هَدَانَا لِهَذَا. Now they actually absolutely are filled with praise of God. You see, ujb is praise of ourselves, because we see things from ourselves. They say, Alhamdulillah, alladhi hadana lahada. God brought us here. God guided us to this place. Now, we may think, okay, we are now on the threshold of paradise. We made it. Our acts made it. We did it. Now, when that ghal is taken out, Alhamdulillah alladhi hadana lahada wa ma kunna linahtadiya lawla an hadana Allah. We never could have made it, no matter how much effort we have done. It was not possible for us to come here. You see, when that ghal is taken away, this sort of attitude comes that why in paradise we are always in peace. One of the most outstanding features of paradise is that peace, which we never have experienced, of course. We say peace. Peace here is actually, when we talk about peace in this world, it's absence of tension. It's not peace, it's absence of... When there is no tension, we say we are in peace. We haven't experienced the peace which is in paradise. And that's why it's called Dar al-Salam, the abode of peace. Now, why are we in peace there? Because we are not in struggle against ourselves anymore. The struggle is gone. And some people achieve that in this world. This is what is called an-nafsul mutma'inna, the tranquil soul. Ya ayyatuha an-nafsul mutma'inna, irji'i ila rabbik, come back to your Lord. Now, that tranquility comes when we stop fighting inside, somehow torn apart. Is this from God? Is this from me? I did it. God made it. You see, this brings this struggle all the time. When we see everything from God, then we have reached the reality. We are tranquil. Now, this tranquility comes when we remember God profusely. Ala bi dhikrillah tatma'innul qulub. With the remembrance of God, the hearts find peace and tranquility. So, as I said, this is a lifelong struggle. We have to remember Him a lot. When we remember Him, gradually, we are familiarized with the way the whole system of creation works. It's all with the power of God, with the will of God. And then inside us as well. As I said, the closer we come to that point, we find more peace, more tranquility. We don't see anything coming from us. Everything from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ما أصابك من حسنة فمن الله وما أصابك من سيئة فمن نفسك. This is the caption that should be before our eyes all the time. If I have done anything good, it's blessing of God. If I do any evil, evil doesn't come from God. It's something to do with me. And this should be always in our minds. Gradually, inshallah, this would be fruitful.
One of the points that I wanted to look at in this debate, I mean, we've talked about coming from us and how we think we have achieved certain things. What about shaitan in this equation? What role does he play in whispering, in highlighting that, listen, you achieved this, or you did this?
You see, shaitan should find some sort of some hole in us to penetrate. Initially, shaitan cannot do anything. Unless they find the shayateen, they find a way to penetrate. And when they find it, of course, they wouldn't let us go easily. When they put their hooks and somehow hook us, then they wouldn't let us go. So initially things come from us. If I'm a mu'jab, then shaitan finds it, wow, this is a point, this is a good step I can put my step on. This is a good block now. And then they try to whisper, to somehow magnify that for us, to decorate things for us, to act accordingly. So shaitan in itself, إنه, as we have in Surah Hajj, إنه ليس له سلطان على الذين آمنوا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. They have no power over those who believe and rely on God. Now, this reliance means what? Means you don't have ujb, you don't have takabbur, you only rely on Him, you only see Him. Now, if you take away that reliance and you rely on yourself, you rely on your qualities, on your abilities, and this is your attitude. I mean, the outward appearance of that is not felt. I mean, a man with ujb and a man without ujb, they may just behave the same way, you see. But it's the attitude, inward attitude. Then the shaitan would come and starts to somehow whisper, makes evil things, beautify evil things for us, and we follow. They cannot force us to do things. They only beautify, they only show things to us to be good, and we follow it. But they have to find a sort of platform from which they could attack us, and this inside us. In Surah Zukhruf, we have this verse, وَمَنْ يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرَ الرَّحْمَةِ. Whoever forgets the remembrance of God, what will happen? نُقَيِّضْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا. We appoint a shaitan. Now, we appoint, like for example, we send rain. Allah does everything. It's a system in this world. If shaitan finds you oblivious of God, they are all around, okay, they come. This is a good place now. I can just stick to it. نُقَيِّضْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِينٌ. They become companions. It is their pleasure, this shayateen, it's their pleasure to find some weak human being to play with. They will be punished for it, and we will be punished for being weak as well. Interestingly enough, I think I mentioned this in one of our other discussions here, that shayateen on the day of judgment, they complain to God that these deceived us because they were mischievous and they attracted us. We were attracted to them, for example. قَالَ قَرِينُهُ رَبَّنَا مَا أَطْغَيْتُهُ. I didn't make him to go to become arrogant or disobedient. وَلَكِنْ كَانَ فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. I found him out of the right path I went to, it was attractive for me, for example, and then I started to play, whisper and such things. So as long as we don't show that weakness in ourselves, shaitan cannot attack us, have no way to penetrate our hearts.
And the final point that I wanted to look at was a hadith that we found very interesting in our research on this topic, where again from Imam Sadiq al-Islam, he says, "Verily God Almighty knows that sin is better for a mu'min than ujb. If it was not thus, he would not have afflicted any mu'min with sin." Can we end, if you can elaborate on this?
Yes, of course. This hadith should not give us the impression that the sins that we do comes from Allah. What the hadith mean is that sometimes Allah takes away His wilaya from us. Sometimes, because wilaya means guardianship, isn't it? God is the guardian of the believers. Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu. When He's the guardian, He wouldn't allow us, even if we want to do certain things, He would stop us some way, somehow in a way that, of course, it doesn't interfere with our free will. Things are very complicated here. We should keep our free will, and then there's guardianship of Allah, and despite having that free will, God always gives us directions, for example. Still you have to choose, but God gives us directions. Sometimes if God sees that, for example, He's giving me direction, I'm under His wilaya, He's giving me direction, but this direction that He's giving me is making me arrogant or self-admiring. Now, He says, okay, wow, this is very dangerous now. This is very dangerous now. Let me withdraw my wilaya from me. Let He do what He wants. And this is why we are inflicted with sin. So that doesn't mean that Allah will make us sin. No, of course, this shouldn't be taken that way. It means that the withdrawal of that wilaya, we are left to ourselves. When we are left to ourselves, as we have in dua, Ilahi la takilni ala nafsi tarfata aynan abada. Do not leave me to myself for one blink of an eye, because then in that blink of an eye I may destroy everything, okay? Now sometimes, because Allah is actually somehow directing us, when He sees that these directions is detrimental now, He withdraws it, and then we commit sin, and then He comes back. And that sin would be, of course, it is going to affect us, because initially the urge was more detrimental than this sin, but both of them are detrimental, okay? But the urge is more detrimental than this sin. So this sin, when we commit it, then we regret, then we say, what a vile, mean person I am. Humbleness comes, humility comes, and it actually starts a new process of growth. This is probably the meaning of the hadith.
Ahsan, thank you very much. Thank you very much for taking the time out. I think we got through all our questions.
Very good.
And we touched on everything very, alhamdulillah. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching at home, and inshallah we pray that we can remove these traits from us. Join us again next week on The Struggle Within. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ahlul Bayt TV, the holy household for every household.